Hey guys, Tommy Bryson here, and today I'm going to be reviewing Peter Lynch's book, Beating the Streets. And by the way, I never put this thing on the book. I don't know why, I just don't like it. I'd rather have it just like this. But today, I officially finished reading this book, and my first thought is always, as all the thoughts in my head are fresh, I want to come on here and share with you guys the most important parts of this book that are right on my subconscious. Now, I have to say something, guys. I am extremely biased, okay? When it comes to Peter Lynch, by far, in my opinion, he is one of the best authors when it comes to explaining investments and how to pick stocks and just understanding finance, explaining it to a 5-year-old dummy like I felt a lot of times when I was reading, for example, Security Analyst by Benjamin Graham. However, Peter Lynch is a lot more different. He uses a lot of examples, and he has a lot of different companies in this book right here, which he takes you step by step on why he made the decision to actually invest into these companies. Now, if you don't know exactly who Peter Lynch is, well, think about this, okay, guys? This guy was a fund manager, and he managed the Magellan Fund over at Fidelity. And if you had invested around $10,000 with him, he would have turned it into over $200,000 in less than 13 years or so. And that to me is amazing. And not just that, that's not the only thing, okay? Because the fund, it grew in size more and more and more until it got to the billions of dollars. And whenever you're trying to invest so much money and the SEC says, hey, you can only own up to 10% of this company, 5% of this company or whatever, you have to find several different companies to actually own. And your universe of investments basically goes down, right? Because you got to put this behemoth of this amount of money into a company that's actually going to have an effect when you put the money in there. For example, you can't put $1 billion into a small company, earn 2%. It's not going to add much to the bottom line. You can't add a $200,000 to a company, it triples, quadruples, but to the bottom line of billions of dollars is not really going to make a big difference. Now, as I dive deeper into this book, because I'm very excited, I don't want to forget, guys, like this video on top of also subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to get notified. Now, I have to say one thing is that I read this book, Beating the Streets. It's around 305 pages. I read at a rate of about 20 pages per day. It took me exactly somewhere around 15 days, 2 weeks to actually be done with this book. But I also read One Up on Wall Street, and I also read Learn How to Earn, also by Peter Lynch. And all of those books, I gave it just phenomenal ratings, okay? But overall, this one, I liked it a lot more. Because aside from it being, for example, a book for beginners, which it is, but the more you go into the book, it's like, okay, now we're getting into more deeper things, more deeper analysis, because when a master really explains something, especially when it comes to stock picking, it kind of feels like, wow, it really is that simple. Find a company you know about, make sure the company is growing, make sure it doesn't have a bunch of debt, and then you basically go ahead and invest money into the company, and it grows and it makes you money. And when you hear that, it just sounds so simple. You have an advantage over the smart people in Wall Street. You can do a lot better because they're limited to these big, massive companies. They don't want to take a lot of risk because they don't want to lose their jobs. So you and me, the average investor, we can go ahead and know about a company before they do and put money into it, right? And when you hear that coming out of Peter Lynch's mouth, you're like, wow, that's pretty simple, right? But then when you see exactly what he actually means by that, what he means by follow the story. And one thing is basically, he'll never tell you invest into a stock just because you like it, because you know about it. No, you got to understand the story. And whenever you hear that, the story, it's like, okay, that's simple enough. But no, he really means understand the story. And the thing is, this guy invested into over 1,000 companies, 1,000 stocks, different stocks. And that to me is insane. It's insanity. And he needed a whole team to actually do it, right? It's a bonanza. And he was a full-time stock picker, had to quit because basically spending too much time not with his family, if you know what I mean, okay? He had a family picture, and then he had, for example, a picture of a company there or something like that, right? Because that's how deep he went into stock picking. But overall, he says something very simple. When it comes to picking stocks, it's all about the story. And when you're trying to figure out the story, it comes down to a few pieces. The first piece is, what is this company about? What does this company do? Why was it started? Just the basics, okay? How much is a company selling for? So what's the price? And you multiply it by the outstanding shares, how many shares are out there in the market, and here is the total selling price. Now, how much can you earn on this company per share exactly? And then you find out what that is by going into the income statement. So you find out, hey, this company is selling for X. It can make me $3 per share. It's selling for $10. That gives it a P ratio of about, let's say, like 3.3 or something like that. Just divide the price by the earnings per share. And he says, wow, so that means in 3.5 years, I can basically get the money back from the earnings per share. That's pretty cool. But the company is also growing by 20%. Well, that's a good sign. And the company has very little debt. It's very conservative how it grows. And, you know, when you start to talk like this, how I'm talking to you guys right now, it gets a lot more complex, right? But the way he does it is so good in the book, because it takes you there step by step. You just don't arrive to those conversations. It's kind of like this road to, hey, here's how I used to think about investing, and here's how I found this out, and this out, and this out. And there are so many stock examples. And I don't know about you guys, okay, but whenever I'm looking to read something and find out and learn something, the best way I learn is via examples. So when he's telling me about real companies he invested money into and how much money he made on this company and that company, what he looked at when he's looking at that company, that makes me very excited, because basically I'm able to learn a lot faster. Now, overall, guys, this book is a really good read. I actually recommend it. I love it. I love it. I love it. But, you know, when you head into this book, it talks also a lot about, in a way, how Magellan was for him. It talks about stock picking. It talks about research and development. So how you go out there, you look for companies. And once I read this book, my life has never been the same, okay? Because whenever I go to Costco, or actually just Costco, because I just did this recently, when I go to Costco and I looked at all of these brands, I just grabbed my phone and I was like, yo, I gotta go ahead and make a list of all of these brands that I basically buy. Because that's the thing, right? You do a bunch of research. And then when I was done with this entire list, I think it's, where is it? I can't find my list right now on my notes, but oh yeah, here it is. I made like an entire list of just different stocks that I'm looking at, okay? Plus some other stuff in there. But that's the entire idea. Like, you kind of, when you go out there, you start to also think like a stock picker, like, I like this company, why do I buy it? Why does she want this company? Why does my aunt or my girlfriend or my wife or my husband or whatever it is, why do they like this company over this company? And you try to figure that out, and then you go on Google, you look up the company, look up its earnings, its balance sheet, you look up who owns it, and then it's kind of like, it just becomes a lot more fun and exciting, because what you're actually doing is discovery. And one big thing that put things into perspective for me was, I always used to think that, for example, when you had a stock picker like Warren Buffett or Peter Lynch, like they would have this sum of money and they would find a stock, put the money in the stock, and then boom, if that works out, they make more money. Then they find another stock and then boom, more money and more money. But in reality, it's not like that. It's more like they have a portfolio, right? And they have X amount of money, and they say, well, the goal is to find a few undervalued companies and put them into the portfolio, and overall the portfolio is going to outperform the market overall. And the idea is, you don't have to find like this one company. It's more like you just find a bunch of undervalued companies. And this is where I learned the rule of 5. And the rule of 5 basically says, well, when you're looking at different companies and you have a portfolio of maybe 5 of them, 1 is going to do amazing, excellent. 3 are going to do okay, and 1 is probably going to underperform. So it's kind of like this game of like, hey, just as one of these companies does great, you're going to do amazing and probably outperform the market. Now, the 5 are still important, because these 5 are still responsibly chosen. And just to get 5 companies in one portfolio, you have to look over usually 50 companies, because that's another ratio he gives. He says, Tommy, whenever you're looking at different stocks, you might look at 10 companies, you might find 1. If you look at 50, you might find 5. 110, and so on, okay? And it puts everything into perspective. That's why when I remember I used to read a lot about Warren Buffett and watch a lot of his videos, and also, for example, like the documentaries, and I always said when Warren Buffett was first getting started, all he would do is just read and 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 read. But he wasn't reading, for example, books like these, because basically I'm still in the educational phase. He was more in the autonomous phase of his learning. He was just basically going ahead and reading through the Moody's, the Moody's book, and then finding all these companies, looking through 10 to find 1, 10 to find 1, 10 to find 1, and it's just constant reading to find the best way to allocate your capital. But it's not like you find one company, you put all the cap, unless you find like a very good company and you want to back the truck on it, right? And you put all the money in it, which is very possible. But usually it's about being smart about your capital allocation. Put in 5%, 10% into a company, maybe another 5, 10, 5, 10 here, 5, 10 here. Then you have a bunch of undervalued companies you basically understand and you know. And that to me is amazing. So overall, guys, again, I am what's that word? Breathtaking or out of breath? I don't know what I am. But I love this book. It was a great book. It's a great read. And overall, once you make it to the end of the book, which by the way is always the saddest part to me, because you kind of when you're first starting the book, you're like, oh my gosh, it's like you still have so many pages to go. But then you get to half, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm like halfway there. Like, oh my gosh, I'm probably gonna be done. And when you get to the final page, you're like, I hope it doesn't end. But it doesn't. All good things must come to an end. But there's something here that I want to show you guys in this book. And it comes down to the 20 golden rules, as you see right here. Because towards the end, he kind of says, hey, here are 20 rules I want to give you when it comes to picking stocks. And by the way, if you're looking to read this book, and I read Security Analysis, I read Intelligent Investor, I read this book, One Up on Wall Street, I read a lot of books about stocks. And one thing I can tell you is basically, there is no intrinsic value formula. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist, okay? I've been trying to find it. It doesn't exist. What investing is, when it comes down to it, it's been explained to me in the best way possible by Peter Lynch. It comes down to art, science, and legwork. And what that means is the art is the perspective to be able to see what something is worth beyond what you're seeing right there. The science is to be able to analyze the balance sheet fully to see if the company is actually healthy. And the legwork is to be able to go through hundreds of companies potentially. You want to be a full-time stock picker to find, for example, 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 that are actually solid to put your money into. But it takes a lot of work. And to actually analyze a stock is not just going to be based on the P/E ratio or the balance sheet, is asset to equity ratio or his book value. Is going to be based on all these factors. For example, free cash flow, whatever, or the dividend. All these things are important, but it's more like you're painting a picture with all these details and all these numbers. And it sounds weird, but the more you read, the more you understand how these people actually think. And I'm starting to love it. I really am, okay? So these 20 rules, I picked out 5, which are the most important to me. And by the way, you might be asking me, Tommy, how is it possible that you might set aside like 2 hours, 3 hours to read, and you might only get through like 20, 30 pages? Because basically, whenever you're reading a book about numbers and money, I never recommend you read the book. This is not a reading book. It's a studying book. It's like a textbook with stories, okay? So I'm always writing things down. Like everything I'm reading, every note that I kind of get into my head, I write it down because, as you guys know, one of the best ways to help your learning and make it faster is you read, right? And then you write down, and then you practice, helps you assimilate, and then you just keep doing that over and over and over again, and it gets you a lot faster. I did not want to read this book and read it, for example, in 3-5 days, be done with the book. 2 days later, you ask me what's a P/E ratio, and I'm like, that is the price over the equity. No, price over earnings, okay? But I wanted to really study the book. That was the whole goal. So here are the 5 rules that I got from those 20 that I actually want to share with you guys right now. Number 1 is you have to know what you own and why you own it. I remember when I bought my first companies when I was like 19 years old, I just bought companies for the sake of buying them. Like GoPro. I bought GoPro because I thought this company is going to go up. It went down. I bought Walmart because I thought this was a great company. It was good and it went up, but I had no way of actually knowing it because I didn't really understand the value behind it. So whenever you're investing into a company, you have to know what you're buying. You have to know why you're buying it. And if you own that company, every 6 months you just come back and check back and be like, okay, so why do I still own this company? What is telling me that the company is going to do better tomorrow than it is actually doing today? And that's the whole perspective. And you might think when you hear that, well, Warren Buffett likes to hold companies forever. Warren Buffett is usually buying out companies. So he's investing in, like he's turning well, kind of not public, right? Because a publicly traded company, he's turning into a private company because now he owns it as a part of his conglomerate, and now he kind of has to own it forever in a sense. So you use terminal value. But overall, when me and you are buying companies, we have to approach it as we might not have that much capital, so we have to find the best place to use that capital. If we find a better stock that's doing better than that one, it's more attractive, you might want to invest in the better one, okay? So it's not about holding forever. It's about putting your money into competent companies, but if the story switches and it's not that attractive anymore, you might want to find a different one. Now, number 2 here is stocks are like kids. You don't want to have more than you can handle. So if you're going to be a part-time investor, and that means you're gonna put in like around 4 or 5 hours a day. It sounds crazy, but that's part time. And I always used to think that was crazy, but the more you understand what you're doing here is you're looking through a lot of companies. Whenever I'm trying to practice and I set aside, for example, like an hour, I'm like, this is not enough time. I need more time to like go through all these companies. And it's just practice, so I kind of hold myself back. But overall, if you're gonna be a part-time investor and put in, for example, some part-time hours, you can have, for example, 8 to 12 companies, or for example, a portfolio of maybe 5 or 8 companies or whatever. But the idea is you don't want to have more companies in there that you can keep up with the stories. Because if you have 20, 30 companies in there, now you need to keep up with 20, 30 companies, okay? 20, 30, like 20, 30, 10K annual reports, 20, 30 earnings reports, 20, you know what I'm saying? Like it's a lot of work. So at that point, you're probably not going to be like part-time anymore, but you have to have enough in there to be able to basically keep up with it. So whenever you have, for example, a company is not performing that well, that's where you have to be very good at saying like, hey, okay, I'm going to switch this out, find a better one and put it in here. Number 3 is going to be a decline is like, for example, a cold breeze, okay? That's not the way I want to say it at all. But a decline is to be expected when it comes to the stock market. It's like how we expect winter every January or December, right? It's just something that happens as a part of the whole game here. So when a decline comes, and it will eventually come, your goal as an investor is going to be, hey, prepare for when winter comes. Like, like in what's that show? Lord of the Rings? No, the Game of Thrones ones, right? Winter's coming, so you want to prepare. And that basically means you have cash on hand to take advantage of opportunities when they present themselves. Number 4 here is, by the way, I didn't put this one in here, but I do want to say it to you guys right now, and it's that if you're trying to find companies, like find some bargains, some good deals, and you can't find any, leave your money in the bank. Like it's not an excuse to put your money into companies that you don't understand, you don't want to be invested into, and you don't think they have good prospects and they don't have a good story. And that's very important, because I remember I used to like read about Warren Buffett, and he would say like, I can be here for 2 years, a year, and not make a move. And I'm like, what? Is he crazy? And it's like, it's not like he's inactive. He's looking and searching all the time, of course. But if there's nothing to put his money into, you're not going to put your money into garbage because, hey, there's nothing else. Like, no, you hold on to your capital because when the time does come, and it will come, you rather have money on hand than have some trash companies. Now, no one can predict interest rates or the economy, so just focus on the companies you have and what's happening with them. That's very important because even me as a YouTuber, when I'm trying to give updates on interest rates or the economy or what's going on in China or this and that, I'm telling you based on what I'm learning and what I'm seeing right now. But if I were to tell you, what I know is going to happen in the next 6 months, that's a lie, right? Because I can't predict the interest rates. I can't predict what they're going to do. I can't predict what the economy is going to do either. So it's just like irrelevant. If you're going to be a stock picker, and that's what I learned from Peter here, the idea is the companies you pick out, that's the story you need to be following and what you need to be paying attention to, and also how the economy is affecting those companies. But overall, you can't follow that whole thing. You don't know what's going to happen. And then number 5, and the last one is, with small companies, you rather wait to see a profit until you actually invest into them. I have stickers in here, which I have not used. Where are these? Look, I have stickers in this book. I don't know where they are. They're somewhere. Oh, here they are. They're in this page. Yeah, stickers. I don't know what's going on there, but but I remember when I first started investing, my friend was like, I want to put my money into Snapchat. I want to put my money into Uber. I want to put my money into this company. And I'm like, bro, at the time I had no idea. So I was like, okay, cool. But thinking back now, I'm like, bro, like a lot of these companies, they were coming in public, and they were coming in public because they needed a bunch of capital because they were not profitable yet. So it's kind of like this idea of like, you rather wait to hear good news until you start investing into companies. And that's a very positive mindset to have over the long term. Because I also used to think like, no, you want to invest when the news are terrible. Because if the news are terrible, that's a good sign. But you can also invest when things are getting better and still make a pretty good profit. And the whole idea of this book is that no matter how many stocks you're putting your money into, you're always looking at the fundamentals. What is the actual company? At the end of the day, a stock is not just like something on the computer. It's a real company. And one thing I admire a lot about Peter Lynch that I probably will not be doing is that he would go out on these crazy trips across the world. He would go out to the mall, all this stuff, just to do research on these businesses out in the wild. And I remember reading about he went to this company, Supercuts, and they gave him a terrible haircut. He still bought the company, but I was like, oh, that's a terrible haircut. And I remember those people coming into my town. I was like, oh, I'd rather go to my barber. I don't like this company at all. But it's about that. It's about doing research. So overall, guys, I love this book. I give it a 10 out of 10, honestly, when it comes to investing. Do you want more formulas, more balance sheets? One thing I wish I could, well, not a 10 out of 10, obviously, because I'm adding things here. But one thing I wish I would have saw in this book a lot more of was basically just a lot more. There was a time where he introduced, for example, the income statement and the balance sheet, and he kind of showed like his equations and how he basically did this and that. I wish I would have saw a little bit more of that, you know, like a little bit more of the actual, like, hey, here's how you do this, but this is a book. This is not a textbook, right? So that's to be assumed. But guys, overall, it's a great read. Highly recommend it, and you will walk away with value for sure. As always, shout out to Peter Lynch. And you know, one thing I love about this whole thing of reading books is that you can have somebody like Peter Lynch, a man who's worth millions of dollars, has made billions of dollars from Magellan Fund, and he can basically be with you in a room teaching you everything he knows about stocks just by you reading a book. So take advantage, okay? As always, guys, like, subscribe, hit the bell to get notified, comment down below questions. On top of that, if you made it all the way here, comment down below. I made it, so I know you made it all. Well, comment down below book. This way I know you made it all the way to the end of the video. On top of, up here is another video. Over here is my face. Click subscribe. And as always, long-term team officially out.